Hi, I'm Spencer.
And I'm Anna.
And this is Building Modern. So today we're talking about skim coating the ceiling. More or less basically a review of what it was like to actually try to do this.
And kind of moral of the story is don't.
Right. Like
It's
it
awful.
was really difficult. We had somebody quote us like $850, right? And we were like, well, the materials. I mean, it's $100 if that.
Yeah, like $150 in
Right.
materials. Like we can DIY that.
Yeah, we can do that. It turns out don't do that. It turns out it's very, very difficult, and I understand completely why they would quote something at $850 or more.
Yeah, and that was just for the kitchen, which is like 200 and something square feet.
Yeah, it's not that big of a space. I think somebody quoted us for $2,800 for a whole house, and after thinking about it, that's really reasonable. So, and there are a few ways to do this. So we have a stomped ceiling, or a stippled ceiling, which Anna was showing in a different video. Basically, it has sharp points that come down. It was something they did in the 80s, maybe even the 90s, but I think in the 90s, popcorn ceiling took over.
Yeah.
And a popcorn ceiling is much easier to remove, right?
Right. This the stomp ceiling is just drywall mud on a brush pushed up against the ceiling. It's just kind of like a plaster. Any technique you would use to remove popcorn ceiling does not work for this stippled or the stomped ceiling.
At least anything we tried.
Yeah, it does not work.
So, yeah, you showed a video. We tried doing the water thing.
Yeah, soaking the ceiling with water and then scraping it with a knife, a putty knife. In all of the popcorn ceiling videos, it just came off beautifully in these nice big sheets. Not so with the stomped ceiling at all.
Not at all. Like, no.
Yeah, so our options were to completely take down the drywall and replace it with new flat drywall, which wasn't happening, or skim coating the ceiling, which is what we ended up doing.
Right. Well, mainly DIYing the drywall would have been really difficult just because if we pulled it down and did new drywall, other than I could have rerun the wires and actually made a three-way wire work correctly, other than that, just even holding the drywall up, we would have had to rent a tool or something to do that.
Yeah, drywall lift.
We're not nearly strong enough, and I don't know that anyone actually is. I think everybody uses drywall lift. But anyway, so we decided to skim coat the ceiling. So one of the tools we used was this one right here. So this is just I don't know what they call it, a scraper?
It is called a knockdown knife.
A knockdown knife, because that is totally a knife. It's really big. It's not that sharp.
Basically, we use this just to shear off the really, really pointy bits of the stomped ceiling texture.
And it works really, really well, surprisingly well. It gets rid of the points very, very well. Takes it down to probably you're looking at 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters left of material, so not very much material left.
But definitely you can still see the spider webby kind of looking texture on the ceiling.
Right, and even if you were to paint it, you would still see that.
Right.
So we sanded the ceiling. Now this is one of the sand pads I think we used, but we used something like this. But we also had the hand, like sand poles or whatever it's called.
Pole sander.
Pole sanders. We tried doing that. We were awful at that.
It's terrible. I don't know if it's because the ceiling was so textured and it's really more of a finishing pad, but everything that we looked up said to use a pole sander to knock down the texture. Basically, when we were using it, we used it against the ceiling, and the thing kept on getting snagged on stuff and flipping over and gouging
the ceiling.
Yeah.
And so I think we did do the first sanding before we started applying any drywall mud or anything like that. Before we did that, I think we did use the pole sanders the whole time and had a lot of because it
just
flipped
like,
over every time.
It kept on. It was awful.
But we got it done. That took a while. I mean, that took, I want to say at least a day just to sand, right?
I do not recall.
I think it was a whole day just on sanding, like of scraping. The scraping went really fast. I mean, that was
that's like
not long.
30 minutes maybe?
Yeah, 30 minutes. Yeah, I think 30 minutes.
Yeah,
but then the sanding probably took us, the rest of the evening. We were wiped anyway by the time we were done. It just took so much effort.
Yep.
Which it technically shouldn't. And so that kind of tells us we might have been doing something wrong. And then the next day we got up and we started to do the skim coating.
Right. And so basically Spencer and I tackled it at the same time. He did half the ceiling and I did the other half of the ceiling.
Here's some of the tools we used.
Yeah, we were actually borrowing some putty knives, so we don't have those.
From your dad. We gave them back.
Yeah, we did.
So.
But what happened is that I liked sitting on top of the step ladder, being much closer to the ceiling, using this trough and a small putty knife, and then you were standing on
I said forget it.
Like
we had the little, one of those little one-step
step platforms.
platform.
And that was nice
And
because you
I was
could walk
using
back and forth.
I was varying between a really big one like this and a smaller one.
And grab the Hawk.
Oh, yeah. We were also using this.
So while I was using the trough, Spencer
Yes.
was using the Hawk. I just liked being able to have everything contained in here. It was just a different
Yeah, I was
technique.
using this, and so I was just going like this. Make it, basically, anytime you put a new material in here, use a smaller one than this for doing this. Anytime you do that, you want to kind of just mix it together a little bit just to get out of the air bubbles, because otherwise the air bubbles are really noticeable. Other thing, you can put dish detergent soap, like what brands? I don't know anyway. Just dish detergent soap. Put some soap in there that you normally have at the side of your sink. Put like just a little bit in there and then mix it up, and that can get rid of a lot of the air bubbles.
Yeah, dish soap, not detergent.
Dish soap, but don't do too much, because if you do it too much, it'll start to suds.
Right. And even when you're just working it back and forth in your pan or on your
on
Hawk,
here it really worked.
It gets a creamier texture and works out a lot of the air bubbles. There will still be air bubbles in there, but that translate to the ceiling later that you kind of have to like sand down. But
Right. Well, and then what you do, so we have that. So you have it all up there. The first goal is to get the material on the ceiling. And that's really messy. A lot of it falls on the floor. This is not a clean job.
Right.
At
this point, it's not a dusty job.
No, but it's incredibly dirty. I mean, stuff just falls. It
Yeah.
falls in your hair. I eventually started wearing a hat. I think Anna was from the get-go, so she was smarter.
It's not fun to have in your hair.
And so, so the first job is just getting it on the ceiling, and then you come back with the larger one, and you come across to try to smooth out the whole thing, and then you let it dry.
Yep.
So we probably had to we thought it would dry in a day, right? And it really took 2. Is that right?
I think a day and a half.
Yeah.
The way you can tell is that it turns, it looks kind of a creamy color when it's wet, and then when it's dry, more solidly dry, it's kind of a white, more white. It's not white,
Yeah.
but it's more white. You can tell.
It's an off-white, but yeah, you can tell the difference. And you can also touch it. Like, you can just touch it, and you can tell when it's dry. Because I remember touching it, and it was not dry.
Made squished.
I made finger impressions on it. So
that's not good.
Yeah. So anyway, so these things were what we used.
It's really loud.
That's okay. So we did that, and then what we have to do between each coat is sand it again.
So
did we sand between each coat?
The instructions we read said to. At this point, we did not.
Okay.
We should have, but we did not.
Yeah.
Because it's just that's like the most miserable
so I think
part of the
between
whole
the first
thing.
and second we didn't. Is that right? Or
We sanded the stipple down.
right.
We applied a coat of mud.
Which was hard. Like, we should really emphasize how difficult this is. So you're having your arm above you the whole time with really relatively heavy material for hours and hours. Even switching hands, like...
Well, even holding the mud on the trough.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it gets really, really tiring.
like even holding your hands up in the air with nothing in them is tiring after like a few minutes. So
this was, I mean, there are also guys that will go on like the little leg sticks, things.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why they would do that. That would be a lot easier. But I mean, just in general, this whole
for me
thing
it was
is very
annoying
difficult.
taking the ladder and moving it up and down a lot. It was.
I got more material covered by far.
You did with the platform.
And then the second coat we did. So the first coat is kind of just getting the material on the ceiling. The second coat is evening it out. Like, you're basically filling in any gaps. You're trying to make it smooth.
And then we sanded.
And the idea of it, I mean, think of it. What would it? I mean, think of it like putty. So when you're filling in the gap, if there's a divot, when you fill it in, you're filling in that divot there so that it's filled and flush and flat.
Right, and the idea is not to have a whole lot of excess. That's where people's experience comes into play. But you do need to have the material there in order to sand it down to flush and nice and even. If it's not there, then you're just going to have to go back with another coat and fill that divot in again. Right,
and our biggest point with the first one was having to put enough material on it that it went over all of the remaining stippled portions there were. Because if we didn't make it thick enough, we would still have all that texture.
Yep.
So we had to go over at least, it was twice. Yes. And I did the second one entirely myself, right?
Yes, you did. I'm sorry. But so we knocked down all the points, sanded, applied a coat of mud, let it dry, then applied another coat of mud, let that dry, and then we sanded And then
Right.
as we sanded, you used the hand orbital sander because we decided that the
Yes.
pole sander was gouging the ceiling too much.
Right. So I started with the pole sander, and I think I did like 2 times, and each time it flipped over on me and gouged the ceiling. And I was like, that's it.
I mean, I've seen video of people using a pole sander, and they're just like, this is,
Yeah.
nice and even, and it did not, we must have been doing something wrong. I don't know what it was.
For me, it didn't work. And I tried different materials too, different kind of sandpapers, different grits. It just kept on having the same issue. So
Like a sanding
I said forget
screen
it.
at one point. You used a sanding screen instead of sandpaper.
That's right. So I said forget it, and I used this instead. This is a 6-inch orbital sander. It is not technically the right tool, but I started out, well, I just dropped it, but this guy, I started out doing this above me, and I was so exhausted from doing the previous skim coat layers. I was still exhausted days later. And so this was just too much, like doing that. And it was going so slow. Like I think I got maybe a 2 feet radius covered in like 30 minutes or something. Like it was going really, really slow. So I went over, I said, screw it. I have a good sander. I'm going to use my good sander. It's a 6-inch orbital. I put on, I forget what grit, it had to be like
Really fine.
160 or 200, yeah, maybe 250, something like that, 320, somewhere around there. And I just sanded the whole ceiling.
And as he was sanding, we didn't have the vacuum attachment yet and didn't know it was so inexpensive.
Right.
But I was taking the shop vac and just mimicking his movements with a shop vac just to try to suck up as much dust as possible.
Right, so the back of this, there is an attachment you can get that will attach it to the shop vac.
It's not that awesome. I mean, it is, but
It doesn't really fit our shop vac, but our shop vac could be the problem, not
It could be.
not the attachment. So anyway, I held it like this, and I just went back and forth across the whole thing very lightly. Our whole ceiling still has impressions from this. It still looks like I used an orbital sander on the ceiling.
And technically, at this point, we should have done a 3rd coat of drywall mud, but we were very tired and decided that was good enough.
Right, so yeah, there's still small divots. We could go by one more time and fix everything.
Yeah,
But
there's
no.
still a few air bubbles in the ceiling, but we just decided that was enough, and we ended up just priming and painting.
What are we calling it, hand-plastered ceiling or something?
Yeah, we're going to call it a plastered ceiling.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't look like it's completely a perfect, flat, drywall, like complete sheetrock
Yeah.
job.
But it's not bad.
Yeah, it's not. It's better than it
So
was before.
it's better than it was before. So we painted it and then called it a day. It works okay, and so I don't know. I guess one thing, moral of the story is it's a really messy process. We don't have photos or video from during the process because it was so messy.
Right, and we did, to backtrack a little bit, we did tape off the doorways with plastic and make sure that the air wasn't circulating through
Right.
the house. We also closed off the vents and turned off the ventilation in the house. At the very end, we put a box fan in the window to help suck out all the dust, and Spencer thought it was a great idea to get the leaf blower in there and
That
blow
was a good idea.
all...
It's still a good idea.
Yeah, you did it like 8 times to get all the dust out of there.
Okay, there was dust, like dust, like everywhere, like a whole huge layer of it. So I had on the 3M mask that we have with the pink. So I had that on. It's the HEPA filtration. It's the kind you should wear for something like this. So I had that on. So I was like, I put on goggles, and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna do this. I don't even know if Anna was in on the conversation for this. I just kind of did it.
No, I wasn't.
I just took the leaf blower, put on the highest setting, and just blew the whole thing off and out the window.
Yeah, I think you had to wait for the dust to settle between each time.
Yes,
but,
I'd wait like 5-10 minutes. Everything would settle back down. Again, another big, huge layer of dust, and then I'd use the leaf blower again and out the window. I probably did that about 8 times, but
Yeah.
it was so much faster because there's so much.
Yeah, like sucking
we
up
did,
all that.
I think we did like try to sweep up as much as we could.
Yeah, I think we tried to sweep. It was still a whole bunch.
and you tried to like shop vac it up, and I was like, "This is ridiculous."
Well, it was killing the shop vac filter. Like
Yeah.
we were starting to go through filters. The suction. Was
10 minutes of this, and the filter's full. So, yeah, so that worked really well. Other than our neighbors must be thinking that we're crazy.
You're like, what
because
is
there's a
happening?
huge cloud of dust coming out of
Yeah.
our room. Yeah, so I mean, but yeah, you did seal it off with the plastic and all around, like really sealed
Yeah.
off. And that's what helped us create negative pressure with the box fan going out the window.
Right. And for our particular house, we would be able to do this in the kitchen, maybe the dining room, and the upstairs bedrooms. But our living room and
Den. Great room.
Great room, living room, den, whatever you like to call it, and our master bedroom have crazy high ceilings, number one
25
challenge.
feet.
And also, they're open to the rest of the house. There's no way to seal that off from the rest of the house to contain the dust and the mess. So if we were doing it for the whole house, it would be one big
there's
job.
a couple ways we can do it going forward. Should we talk about that? About what we're going to try to do?
Sure.
Okay, so we have a few things that we're going to try to do. So we have the ones coming up that we can do ourselves, we know. The dining room, which is an 8-foot ceiling. The upstairs bedroom, which is an 8-foot ceiling.
The other upstairs bedroom.
And the other upstairs bedroom.
The hallway up there. The
hallway.
Bathroom up there. Possibly the half bathroom downstairs and the stairwell down to the basement.
So for the dining room, we'd like to separate the sound a little bit because they didn't do insulation between the walls. So we'll probably try to tear that down and replace it with new drywall. Another one, anywhere where there's big stuff, we've decided it's probably just as easy to get 1/4-inch drywall and just put new 1/4-inch drywall over the stippled ceiling.
I've heard
just knock down the
that
points.
I've also heard though that is unadvisable because of the added weight. So I'm not sure about that.
Right. So we're gonna have to see. And then the other one, there's some places where a piece of drywall isn't gonna work, and we might have to just skim coat again.
I think we might skim coat the stairwell.
It's gonna be a small area, so it won't be that bad.
Right.
And
a side note, talking about weight, we used the lightweight drywall compound.
Ultralight.
Ultralight.
It's green.
It's about half the weight.
The bucket's green. Yeah, I don't know, 40% lighter. I can't remember. I think I remember.
It's lighter. It's a little bit more expensive, but just the amount of weight that we were adding to the ceiling because we weren't just mudding seams.
Right.
It was worth it.
Other note is that I haven't seen any major cracking or anything afterwards. That it seems to be fine and worked well. So it did solve the problem we had. It was just a really hard project. Like on a scale of 1 to 10 of how difficult this is, what would you rate it?
I would rate it, I don't want to do it again.
I would rate it about a 9 or something. Like I'd say it's pretty hard.
I mean, it wasn't difficult in the fact of, oh no, we don't know what we're doing and it's structure and it's scary. It was just physically demanding.
Yeah. So anyway, things to keep in mind. So that was the skim coating of the ceiling. I think it went pretty well overall, but I don't know if I'd absolutely go into it again, especially with a space that large.